Hello and welcome everybody to part 2 of the JBA All-In Podcast's NBA Offseason Review. Part 1 was draft, and now we're going to be going over free agency and trades. So we'll start it off with free agency, then move into trades. So to start it off with free agency, like I said, we're just going to go over some of the players mentioned here technically moved via trade, but they were listed as free agents, and some of them were like a sign and trade, etc. So that's why they're part of the free agency section. So we'll start off with the smaller signings and then move to the bigger signings. So let's start with Serge Ibaka, formerly of the Toronto Raptors, signing a 2-year, $19 million deal with the Los Angeles Clippers. So he's kind of replacing Montrezl Harrell, who left earlier in free agency. So Jack, how do you think this helps the Clippers, and their potential run in a championship this year?
I think this is pretty big for the Clippers. Obviously, you lose Montrez to the Lakers, which isn't something that you want to see. But, Serge is a great player. I think he's going to be able to come in. He's going to be able to really impact the team. And maybe he'll be the glue that the Clippers really needed last season because there were some locker room issues in the Clippers locker room. Serge is a veteran. He's 31. Maybe he can come in, work with those other vets, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, and maybe, they could click a little bit more and get more success because Montrez said he wanted out of that locker room. He wanted out. So maybe it's his or maybe he was the problem. Maybe it's just the Clippers' entire locker room as a whole. So I think this is big. Serge Ibaka is a very talented player. I mean, he's not in his prime anymore. Last season, he averaged 15.4 points, 8 rebounds, and 1 assist, which are pretty solid numbers. He's going to be able to come in. He's going to be able to replace Montrez. He's going to be able to play pretty solid. He's going to be pretty good. So I think this is a good pickup. Obviously, I would personally want Montrezl Harrell, but, having Serge Ibaka, that's not bad at all.
I completely agree. And on the topic of Montrezl Harrell, let's talk about what the Lakers did at the big man position this offseason, signing 2 free agents. Well, they actually traded for them, but they were free agents at the beginning of the offseason. Montrezl Harrell, Marc Gasol. They got Marc Gasol on a 2-year, $5.3 million deal, and Montrezl Harrell on a 2-year, $19 million deal. So you got Montrezl Harrell, who's 26. He's kind of a young guy. He was six man. He was in the 6 man of the year talks last year. And obviously went on to win the award. So that's a great addition, especially after losing Dwight Howard to the Sixers, and also trading away JaVale McGee to the Cavs. You really came in and just replaced them right away with, I'd say, an upgrade for both of them, Marc Gasol and Montrezl Harrell. Marc Gasol, he's a veteran who was a big part of the Raptors championship run a few years ago. He came in, he can shoot the 3-ball really well. Something that the Lakers might have needed a little bit later in the playoffs last year. They still were able to get it done, win the chip. But this season, with a lot of star players coming back from injury, they're going to be forming some semi-super teams this year. I think that they're definitely going to need to improve as much as they can. And Marc Gasol and Montrezl Harrell definitely do that for them. I think both these guys can come in and make immediate impact. Marc Gasol off the bench and Montrezl Harrell potentially starting. So I just think they obviously replaced they replaced Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee with these two at the big man position, and they also upgraded, in my opinion, with these 2 players. And I think that they should be the favorites to repeat this season.
I think this is pretty big for the Lakers overall because first to get Montrezl Harrell, like you said, he's a very skilled player. I think it's an upgrade. But you sign him for a 2-year, $19 million deal. If you look at other players, look at someone like Gallinari. I mean, no offense to Gallinari, but he's getting 3 years, $61.5 million. I don't really know if Gallo is worth $61.5 million at this stage in his career. And Montrez, who I expected to get, a much bigger contract than that, gets 2 years, $19 million, and he's a starting caliber player. I just think this is great overall for them. I mean, you got two upgrades at the center position. You got a more defensively minded Marc Gasol, and you got Montrezl Harrell. I think this is amazing overall because the Lakers found a way to get better and save the money too, because 2 years, $19 million, that's crazy, especially for a player like Montrezl Harrell.
Moving into our next free agent, we have Danilo Gallinari, who you just talked about, who signed. He's kind of been infamous for having big contracts over the years. And he signed another big one, which might have been too big. Again, another $20+ million deal for a player that it's debatable whether or not he's worth that much. He's 32 years old. Signed with the Hawks, like you said, 3 years, $61.5 million. The Hawk, $61.5 million dollar. So 3 years, $61.5 million deal. And the Hawks have made some moves this offseason. They kept around their core pieces like Trae Young, Clint Capella, John Collins, and they had a pretty good offseason as well, bringing in Danilo Gallinari and also Bogdan Bogdanovic, who we're also going to talk about now, who was a restricted free agent for the Kings, but the Hawks did went grab him from for 4 years, $72 million. So they got two good players in Bogdanovic and Danilo Gallinari, and they also drafted Onyeka Okongwu in the draft. So I think the Hawks are really making moves right now. I don't know about the Gallinari signing. Like, when you have Okongwu, Capella, and John Collins, you don't really need Gallinari at power forward. Maybe he can play small forward, but I'm not sure about that. He's probably coming off the bench. And especially for that much money, for him to probably be I'd argue he's probably going to be the fifth best starter on that team. Or to pay that much money for that if he starts, or potentially just a bench player. I don't, especially, guy who isn't that young either. He's 32. I just don't know if I like the sign, but Bogdanovic, I like that for them. He's still young. He's still only 28, 4 years. I'll have him until he's 32. That's a very fine, 28 to 32. He'll be in his prime. And I think he'll fit right in with Trae Young. So I think the Hawks definitely are a threat to make the playoffs this year as a 7 or 8 seed. And hopefully, they stay healthy and everything. They had some, honestly, the Hawks right now, their management is making some big moves this offseason, trying to put them in a prime position to make the playoffs this year and hopefully contend for a title in the near future.
Yeah, and this was a pretty good, two pretty good pickups for them here, Bogdan and Danilo Gallinari. I mean, Gallo was averaging 18.7 points, 5.2 rebounds, and 2 assists per game, which are pretty good numbers. I mean, I don't think that's worth the amount of money that he's getting, especially that he's 32 and he's probably going to regress. But those are pretty good numbers. And then you got Bogdan, who's probably entering his prime, or he's in his prime, 15 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. I think this is good, especially from a leadership standpoint on the Atlanta Hawks. I mean, Gallo especially is going to be able to come in, train some of the younger players. Onyeka Okongwu, Trae Young might not be able to learn a lot from him, but I think that's great for Okongwu. And I just think these are two pretty solid pickups. Definitely not the best in free agency. I'd say mid-tier. Gallo's making too much money in my opinion, but they're a good team. These two signings are going to help them out. And, you can't be too mad, especially when you have Trae Young, and especially when you're only going to get better as a team. So I think this is a good pickup.
Moving into our next signing, we have Christian Wood, a part of a sign and trade. Christian Wood from the Pistons to the Rockets, 3-year, $41 million deal. Christian Wood, a guy who really kind of broke out last year with the Pistons, still only 25 years old. I think he can definitely be a core piece on, a playoff level team. The Rockets, they've lost some stuff the last couple of years. They don't have Chris Paul anymore. They replaced him with Russell Westbrook. That kind of failed last year. They also lost Clint Capella. They just lost a lot of stuff since, they were in the Western Conference Finals just, recently. They hope that Christian Wood and maybe a few moves later and they'll be back in contention. But I just don't know. I think the Rockets might be past their championship window. But I do think that this Christian Wood signing gives them a chance if there is any at all.
Yeah, definitely. Christian Wood's a great player. 3 years, $41 million, especially for a team that's, you said they're probably past their championship window. I think they're way past it, especially if you might lose James Harden. Not good, but 3 years, $41 million. Christian Wood's a great player. I think it's worth it, maybe a little bit too much, but he pretty much covered it all. I think this is it's an okay signing if you want to preserve, the team's success, but I don't see this Rockets team going very far. I mean, obviously they're going to make the playoffs, but really nothing more than that. So it's kind of questionable, but they're not too bad of a signing. It's nothing special, but nothing good.
And finally, in a not so star-studded free agent class, the marquee signing, pretty much the most marquee signing of the entire offseason, was Gordon Hayward going from the Celtics to the Hornets. It wasn't technically a signing. It was technically a sign and trade. But he now is on a 4-year, $120 million deal with the Hornets. There were lots of teams interested in Hayward. My picks were interested. I kind of wanted them to get him. I would not have liked it if they got him for this much money, though. I think it's a little bit overpaid for the Hornets, but but Gordon Hayward, a guy who's he's old, but he's not too old. 30 isn't terrible. He's still got maybe 4 or 5 years left of quality basketball. Unless you're like LeBron James, who just is in his prime forever. But yeah, I mean, this might not be. There's still potential for some stars to move. Obviously, there's Giannis rumors, and there's AD hasn't re-signed with the Lakers yet. But all that stuff, I think AD will resign the Lakers. I don't think Giannis will move. I don't think he'll decline his option and all that. But yeah, this definitely helps the Hornets out, who also, like the Hawks, who missed the playoffs last year, could definitely be trying to make a playoffs this year. I think the Hawks have a lot better chance than the Hornets do. I think the Hornets have some ways to go before they're legit playoff team. But they could sneak in. They lost Jimmy Lamb last offseason. But they rebooted. Devontae Graham broke out last year, and also they drafted LaMelo Ball in the draft, and they also are now sending Gordon Hayward to that deal. So I think that this team is not a playoff team, and they're nowhere close to contention, but they're getting there, and Gordon Hayward could definitely be a veteran who could help some of the younger guys develop and could help get them some experience when they do think that they have an opportunity to get to championship level.
Yeah, and I don't think the signing is really a signing that's meant to boost their team overall. I mean, it is, but I think MJ knows that they're not a playoff team and definitely is not a contending team. So I think this is more of a kind of mentorship, and maybe he's probably the best player on the team, to be honest, if he can stay healthy, which that's the big question. Can Gordon Hayward stay healthy? If he can stay healthy, he's a star in the league, but that's been something that's plagued his whole career, injuries. So 4-year, $120 million, that's a lot of money. I think that's way overpaid. I think more around $80 million, probably $60 to $80 million. That's probably the price range I would give Gordon Hayward, especially with him being 30 years old. But he's still in his prime. He's still going to play good basketball, but I think this is really a team that we're not really going to care about Gordon Hayward that much. I mean, his performance, obviously, I'm a Gordon Hayward fan. I want to see him perform, but I think this team's story is more about LaMelo Ball and how he plays. So I think this signing is really just to benefit LaMelo, get him some more options, really make LaMelo a better player. So it might not be that bad of a signing after all, but it's still kind of questionable, especially giving him that much money.
Now let's move into the trade. So we'll start off with another Laker move to boost their team. Dennis Schroeder, he was a Sixth Man of the Year nominee last year. He's been one of those guys, one of those elite six men for a long time now, multiple seasons, and Lakers got him in a very good trade. I mean, they're just making their team a lot better. Their team is a lot better than it was last year. And, as long as LeBron doesn't regress, because due to his age, people might, you could say that he would regress, but it's LeBron. He's most likely not going to be regressing at all. So this Schroeder deal and also the signings we talked about earlier with the big men definitely makes them favorites to win it all again this year. I think barring injury, they'll at least, get to the Western Conference Finals, and at least so I just think that this just really, really helps out their team overall because, like I said, it makes them a contender for back-to-back years. They're favorites to repeat. As it's looking at it right now, I'd predict them to repeat. Their starting lineup looks absolutely great. You got Schroeder, you got Braun, you got AD, you got Trez, you got Gasol, and then that's obviously a pretty big starting lineup there. So I'll probably have like Caruso, maybe KCP in there at their 2 spot. Who really knows? But yeah, it's just I think a great trade overall for the Lakers. And they didn't have to give up too much either. They gave away Danny Green and obviously Danny Green. Obviously Danny Green. He was kind of, I'm not gonna say hated, but he was kind of got some hate for what happened in the finals. But overall, he was a big part of that team, that championship run. He's a really good 3-and-D guy. They also lost Rondo in the offseason. So I think Schroeder, they're not exactly swapping Schroeder for Danny Green, but it's essentially what they're doing since they don't really mind picks and all that. They're making a championship run right now. And Schroeder is definitely a major upgrade over Danny Green. And I'd argue he's more valuable than both Danny Green and Rondo combined. Rondo definitely was a big piece to that championship run, like Danny Green was. 2 veterans that brought a lot of juice to the team. But I still think that Schroeder definitely increases their odds of getting the championship again, more than keeping them back, more than keeping Green and Rondo would have.
You're on mute.
Oh, do you not want to talk about the Dennis Schroeder trade?
Oh, wait. You stopped? Oh, my bad. I thought you were going to keep going. Okay. I think Dennis Schroeder is an amazing pickup. It's like Montrez. They're probably the 2 best 6-men last year. And Dennis, like Montrez, in my opinion, is a starting caliber player. And I think they're both phenomenal. This is a great trade. You're going to go to Danny Green, who's regressed overall. You're giving up picks, which don't really matter for the Lakers at this point. But look at the Thunder, man. They're going to have all of the first-round picks, literally all of the first-round picks in the future. It's going to be drafting left and right. But for the Lakers right now, I think this is a win for both teams. The Lakers, even more contention if LeBron regresses just a tiny bit. His team will be able to pick up some slack. And the Thunder get more picks. I think this is great for both teams, but the Lakers are even better than last season, which is crazy. It's kind of crazy to say. So I think this is a great pickup, and they're still a great team overall, and they're my favorites to win the NBA championship.
Next signing, we had a 4-team deal between the 4-team deal. 4-team deals are pretty rare. This 4-team deal was between the Thunder, the Nuggets, the Bucks, and the Pelicans. So I'm just going to go over by what each team received. So the Pelicans, they got Steven Adams and Eric Bledsoe, along with 2 future second-round picks from the Bucks, and the right to swap 2 first-round picks with the Bucks. Doesn't mean they're swapped already, but the right to swap them. The Bucks got Drew Holiday and Sam Merrill, which was a 60th overall pick in this draft. So the Bucks got 2 players from the Pelicans, and the Pelicans got a player from the Bucks along with picks from the Bucks. The Nuggets got R.J. Hampton, and the Thunder got George Hill, Zylan Cheatham, forgive me if I pronounce that incorrectly, Josh Gray, Darius Miller, Kenrich Williams, future first-round pick from the Nuggets, a 2023 second round from the Pelicans via the Wizards, and a 2020 second-round pick from the Pelicans via the Hornets. So, yeah, 14 deals are rare, but we're just going to go over, the big stuff. The Nuggets and the Thunder didn't really get that much to really improve that much. I mean, R.J. Hampton, rookie, he could potentially make an impact, but we're just really going to be talking about the Bucks and the Pelicans and what they got and what they got and gave away. So for the Pelicans, get it, a young team already. It's super talented with Zion, with Lonzo. You had Drew Holiday in that locker room, who was a veteran, one of the veteran players on that team. But you traded him away. You got Eric Bledsoe in return. Not bad. You also ended up getting Steven Adams from this trade, who's another veteran like Bledsoe, like Holiday, that can come in and he can start at the center spot. And you've also got Brandon Ingram, who you re-signed. So this team is absolutely loaded, in my opinion. I think that this team is very well a playoff team right now, like an 7 or 8 seed. I think the Thunder will fall out of it. I think this team will probably beat out the Trailblazers. Maybe the Suns can get in there. I don't know. As much as I want to say the Kings could probably get in there, I don't know about that. But yeah, I think the Pelicans definitely made great improvements with this trade, and they also were able to keep BI. And overall, I think they're definitely in a prime position to make the playoffs this year. And honestly, they have young guys who could potentially make big strides, which could maybe put them over the top and make them a dark horse contender. I might be jumping again a little bit though. And then for the Bucks, they're kind of doing some weird stuff this offseason. There's all the Giannis rumors and stuff. They got rid of Bledsoe, but they did get Drew Holiday. I think I'd take Holiday over Bledsoe, in my opinion. So I think they have improved a little bit, I guess you could say. And they also got Sam Merrill, young guy, 60th pick. I don't know, though. They're still, obviously an elite team because you still have Giannis, you still have Chris Middleton, and now you have Holiday. They were definitely an older team last year, which will probably regress this year, though. So I would not predict them to be the 1 seed this year. But they're definitely still going to probably have home court advantage in the playoffs, etc. So I think that, there's not much they didn't do really anything, they didn't do anything at all to make their team worse, and they did a little bit to make their team better.
Yeah, I think especially, my winners for this trade is from the Pelicans, Steven Adams, Eric Bledsoe. That's great, especially, mixing some veterans and the younger players that they do have. Drew Holiday, I think, is a great addition to the Bucks, but kind of a strange team. They're going to be a good team, like you said, but it's kind of hard to tell. But the Bucks, or no, not the Bucks, I'm sorry. The Pelicans, Steven Adams, he's one of my favorite players in the league. Eric Bledsoe, 2 very good players. And you get the picks, so I think it's just great for the Pelicans overall. Sure, you lose Drew, but you get Steven Adams and Eric Bledsoe, and you still have Zion, you still have Alonzo, and you still have BI. So Pelicans just got better, in my opinion, and the Pelicans looking like a scary team. Bucks are still looking good. This is pretty good for the Nuggets. They get RJ Hampton. He's a solid player. And the Thunder just really getting these picks here, plus the 5 players that you mentioned. But, they're really just stacking up these picks right now. The future first-round pick in 2 seconds from the Pelicans. This is really interesting trade overall. My winners are going to be the Pelicans, definitely. And probably the Bucks or the Thunder next, but pretty solid overall.
And then we're going to be so obviously there's a blockbuster Chris Paul trade, which Kelly Oubre was involved in. We'll get to that trade after this trade, which we're going to talk about the second trade involving Kelly Oubre, in which the we're going to talk about the second trade involving Kelly Oubre, in which the Warriors got him from the Thunder, who he was originally traded to. Warriors got Kelly Oubre, and the Thunder got a protected first-round 2021 draft pick and a second-round draft pick via Denver. So, I mean, for the Warriors, obviously, we were talking about them, kind of being back to contention this year. Klay Thompson got injured. Oubre is a great addition to his team. Oubre is a guy who I don't think, he's got a big contract, and he's not worth his contract. I think he's got a star level contract. I don't think he's a star. I think he can maybe develop into one, but he's just a good, solid player, and on the Warriors who have Curry, you still have Green and Wiggins and Wiseman. I think adding Oubre as well really completes the starting lineup for this team. If they had Klay right now, this team would be looking so good, but they don't, and that's really a bummer. But I still think that this team is probably going to get, top 6, top 5 seed, as long as they can stay healthy, and hopefully, and if James Wiseman plays up to the level that he's expected to. So overall, I think this is a great trade for the Warriors. And then for the Thunder, this really just ties into the trade from Chris Paul. They're just loading up on picks. They're going into a full rebuild mode right now. They got rid of their veterans, Chris Paul and Steven Adams. and they're getting tons of picks. They got a bunch of young guys as well. The Ricky Rubio in that Suns trade, he's not very young, but they're getting some young guys. They trade away some of those young guys, though. Like, they can trade away Oubre, like we're talking about right now, and they have to trade away Jalen left to the Pacers, kind of like a under-the-radar trade. But yeah, I mean, I think they're just kind of loading them a full rebuild mode right now. They're really the only guy I think you can really call. They only have one guy for like that they'd call their guy who's going to stay around for the long run. That's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and it makes sense. He's a young guy. He's going to develop into a star. So I think that the Pelicans loading up on picks. Pelicans, Thunder loading up on picks with multiple trades going back to last offseason and this offseason, and they've got one franchise piece that they're going to build around it. And honestly, currently they're not looking good for this year, obviously, but in the long run, with all these picks, all these opportunities to draft more stars and draft more great players, and all these picks you can use for trade value to trade for good players to potentially make a championship run, they're looking good in the long run. I feel like in a half decade to a decade, this team's going to be a legit contender as long as they can use these picks well and they can get the most out of these picks.
I definitely agree with you there. They're going to be a scary team in the future with all those picks. I mean, you can draft, you can trade. They're just going to have a lot of value, especially if they're not that great of a team. I think it's just great for the team overall. That's just stacking up on the picks. I mean, trust the process. That didn't really work out. I mean, there's still time, but it didn't work out. So this rebuild looks really promising. So we're going to see what happens.
And then for the blockbuster trade, our last trade, Chris Paul, 10-time All-Star Chris Paul goes to the Suns, a team that already has Devin Booker, a young superstar. They've already got DeAndre Ayton, a young star who could potentially develop into a superstar caliber player. The Suns kind of unloaded. They gave away a lot of great role players that they would have liked to keep, like Ricky Rubio or Kelly Oubre. Once again, the Thunder traded away those two, and also Jalen the Thunder traded away every player they got out of this trade with the Suns. They traded away Ty Jerome, traded away Jalen Lutch, traded away Kelly Oubre, traded away Ricky Rubio. The only thing that they kept was they didn't keep anything, which is kind of weird. I mean, but it's whatever. But because they got picks out of trading those guys away, which is I think what they were just trying to do here. So they got a bunch of picks from this trade and also the trades that they did with trading the players they got from this trade. So the Thunder, like we just said, loading up on picks, blah blah blah. But for the Suns, like I said, you already got Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, and now Chris Paul. I think Chris Paul won't be a star caliber player for much longer, but if the Suns really have confidence that they can make a championship run in the next 2 or 3 years, and I guess I understand the trade. I don't know if I'm the Suns management that I would do that, but it's whatever. And this definitely makes them a scary team in the playoffs. With the in a star-driven league, sometimes you don't need much depth, but one injury to this team I think really takes it all down. That's where depth comes into play sometimes, and also, when they play teams with depth, that's probably gonna hurt. So that's why I don't think that they can be a contender just yet. They don't have the depth for that, but who knows? Maybe make a huge splash next offseason. They get a bunch of depth, and they just load up for a championship run, not necessarily with stars, but with depth, because they got this team right now with these stars. If they had good role players behind them, could be a championship contender. But the problem is they don't have those role players behind them. So I don't think they're a contender just yet, but they're definitely close. And I think the management knows that.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, Chris Paul, we're gonna have to see how that works out. I'd say it's a risk. We don't know how good he's gonna be this season. He might have regressed. He's still gonna be a solid player, but he's gonna be the star. Future Hall of Famer, we all know, or is he just gonna be pretty solid player? But I think this is a great trade, for both teams. It makes the Suns a little bit more competitive, and now they basically have to make the playoffs. And the Thunder get all those players who they traded away and a 2022 first-round pick. So I think this is going to be really interesting for both teams. The Thunder keep the tank, or not really the tank, but keep the rebuild going. And the Suns get Chris Paul, so now they're a scarier team, not a contender, but a scarier team. It's going to be really interesting. So I'm excited to see how Chris Paul is in a Suns jersey. I think it's gonna be a great trade. It's gonna be interesting to watch. Devin Booker's gonna have another great player to play alongside with.